I never thought a tiny alumni sticker on my car would trigger an all-out war with the HOA. But when you give someone like Karen Wilkinson, our overzealous HOA president, a little power, she turns into a full-blown dictator. From petty rule enforcement to outright vandalizing my car, Karen thought she could bully me into submission. What she didn't know, I'm a corporate attorney with lawyers on speed dial, and I wasn't about to let this slide. What started as a ridiculous HOA complaint quickly escalated into an investigation, a police report, and ultimately, Karen's downfall in front of the entire neighborhood. Stay tuned, because this story is packed in entitlement, karma, and a legal smackdown you won't want to miss. Let me start from the beginning, but first, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It started on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. I had just moved into Oakwood Estates 3 weeks prior, a charming suburban neighborhood with manicured lawns, coordinated mailboxes, and apparently a dictator disguised as an HOA president named Karen Wilkinson. I'm a corporate attorney by profession, specializing in contract law. After a decade of working my way up in my firm, I finally made enough to buy a house in what the real estate agent had described as the most prestigious community in the county. What she failed to mention was that this prestige came with a side of petty tyranny in the form of the most controlling HOA I'd ever encountered. I was still unpacking boxes when the doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was a woman in her mid-50s with an asymmetrical bob haircut, so severe it could cut glass. She wore beige capri pants, a polo shirt with the Oakwood Estates logo embroidered on the pocket, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello there, new neighbor. I'm Karen Wilkinson, president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association," she said with a voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I just wanted to personally welcome you to our community and drop off your welcome packet." She thrust a 3-inch binder into my hands. "This contains all our community guidelines, bylaws, and regulations. I strongly suggest you familiarize yourself with them immediately. We take our standards very seriously here." The way she emphasized seriously made it sound like a threat rather than community pride. I accepted the binder with what I hoped was a gracious smile. "Thanks, I appreciate it. I'm just getting settled in, but I'll definitely take a look when I have a moment." Karen's smile tightened. "Well, don't wait too long. Your garbage bins were visible from the street yesterday, which is violation number 47, section 12. But since you're new, I'll let it slide this time." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and be sure to submit your parking permit application. Any unauthorized vehicles in driveways will be subject to fines and possibly towing." With that cheery welcome, she left. I closed the door and set the binder aside, already feeling the weight of having moved into what appeared to be the most uptight neighborhood in the state. Over the next few days, I tried to settle in, but Karen seemed to be everywhere. She left notices on my door about grass that was a 1/4 inch too tall. She emailed about a package that had remained on my porch for more than the allotted 4 hours. She even stopped by one evening to inform me that my porch light was the wrong color temperature. Apparently, we were strictly a soft white community, not daylight. Through it all, I remained polite but distant. After dealing with high-stakes negotiations all day, I had little energy for neighborhood politics. I simply want to come home, have a quiet evening, and be left alone. But Karen seemed to have made it her personal mission to ensure I understood exactly who was in charge. "Just trying to help you integrate smoothly," she told me one Saturday morning when she appeared at my door to point out that my newspaper hadn't been retrieved within the specified 30-minute window after delivery. Some people have trouble adjusting to community living. I've been living in apartments and condos for 15 years. The problem wasn't community living. It was her personal vendetta against anyone who dared breathe without her permission. "I appreciate your dedication," I responded with a carefully neutral tone. "I'm sure I'll get the hang of things eventually." She beamed at me, completely missing or ignoring the subtle sarcasm. "That's the spirit." "Oh, and don't forget that exterior window washing is scheduled for Tuesday. All blinds must be closed by 8 a.m. or you'll be fined for privacy obstruction." Right. The real trouble began when I put a small university alumni sticker on my car's rear window. It was about 2 inches in diameter, a simple blue and gold emblem from my law school. Nothing offensive, Nothing flashy, just a small point of pride. The morning after I applied the sticker, I found a neon orange violation notice tucked under my windshield wiper. Unauthorized vehicle modification. It declared in bold letters, Reference Community Guidelines Section 8.3. No decals, stickers, or other adhesive decorations permitted on visible exterior surfaces. Please remove immediately to avoid further action. I sighed, removed the notice, and went to work. I had a major client meeting that day, and frankly, the last thing on my mind was a tiny sticker that literally no reasonable person would care about. I forgot about the notice entirely until I returned home that evening. As I pulled into my driveway, Kara materialized from seemingly nowhere, clipboard in hand, and a look of grim satisfaction on her face. She marched up to my car window before I could even turn off the engine. "Did you receive the violation notice this morning?" she asked without so much as hello, peering at me through the glass with narrowed eyes. I rolled down my window and nodded, trying to maintain my professionalism. "Yes, I did. It's about the alumni sticker. I'm afraid I don't see how." Section 8.3 clearly states no decals or stickers, she interrupted, pointing to a highlighted passage on her clipboard. "This is your second notice. Failure to comply within 24 hours will result in a $50 fine, which will double every subsequent 24 hours. I took a deep breath. "Karen, it's a small university emblem. It's not offensive or large. Many of the cars in the neighborhood have similar stickers. I've seen sports team logos, honor student announcements, even those stick figure families." Karen's face tightened. "Tended those homeowners all submitted proper authorization forms for their display items. Rules are rules, and they apply to everyone, especially new residents who haven't proven themselves yet." "Haven't proven myself? I lived here for barely a month, paid my dues on time, and kept to myself. What exactly was I supposed to be proving?" But I knew better than to engage in that conversation. "I'll look into the authorization form," I said neutrally, though I have to say requiring paperwork for a 2-inch sticker seems excessive. "That's why I'm the HOA president and you're not," Karen replied with a condescending smile. "Some people understand the importance of standards, and some just want chaos. Good night." As she strutted away, I noticed her car had both a proud Oakwood board member bumper sticker and a "My Child is an Honor Student" decal. The hypocrisy wasn't surprising, but it was still irritating. That night, I looked through the giant binder she'd given me. Sure enough, buried on page 78 was a vehicle appearance modification request form that required a written description of the proposed modification, a color photograph, a detailed drawing, dimensions and placement specifications, material composition details, and I kid you not, a statement explaining how the modification enhances community values and aesthetic harmony. All this for a 2-inch sticker. I set the form aside, deciding to deal with it over the weekend. The next morning, I was running late for an important deposition. I rushed out the door, coffee in hand, only to stop dead in my tracks. There, across the back window of my car, where my small alumni sticker had been, was a 6-inch scratch in the glass. It wasn't there the night before, and it was precisely where my sticker had been, as if someone had used a key or other sharp object to forcefully remove it. I was livid. This was deliberate vandalism. I took out my phone and documented the damage from multiple angles, making sure to capture the scratch itself, the surrounding undamaged areas, and the whole car for context. I even took a short video explaining what had happened and showing the sticker remnants. As I was recording, Karen's front door opened across the street. She emerged with a watering can for her porch flowers, saw me examining my car, and gave me a little wave that could only be described as smug. "Good morning," she called out cheerfully. "I see you've addressed the violation. That's what I like to see, prompt compliance." I stared at her in disbelief. "Did you do that?" I asked, pointing to the damage. Her smile never faltered. "Do what? Remove an unauthorized sticker? Of course not. That would be trespassing, and as HOA president, I would never break the law. I'm merely noting that the violation has been resolved." I was seething, but I had a deposition to get to. I got in my car and drove to work, my mind racing through my options. By the time I reached my office, a plan was forming. During my lunch break, I called 3 of my colleagues who specialize in property law and civil litigation. After explaining the situation, they were all too happy to help a fellow attorney deal with an overzealous HOA president. One of them, Maria, had actually fought and won a case against an HOA that had tried to foreclose on an elderly resident over painted shutters. She was particularly eager to assist. "These HOA dictators are the worst," Maria said, her voice animated with righteous indignation. "They get drunk on the tiniest bit of power and think they're untouchable. Let's show her she's not." By that evening, I had a professionally drafted cease and desist letter detailing the vandalism, with citations to relevant state laws regarding property damage and harassment. We also included printouts of Section 8.3 alongside photos I had taken of at least a dozen other vehicles in the neighborhood with various stickers and decals, including Karen's car. For good measure, we included the HOA's own bylaws regarding board member conduct and the proper procedures for handling violations, which notably did not include damaging resident property. Rather than delivering it myself, I had a courier service hand-deliver the letter the next morning, a little touch of formality that I knew would get under Karen's skin. The courier was instructed to ensure it was placed directly into her hands and to return signed delivery confirmation. That evening, as I arrived home from work, I could see Karen pacing on her front porch, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. When she spotted my car, she ended her call and stormed across the street toward me. "How dare you send me that threatening letter?" she shouted, waving the envelope. Her face flushed red with anger. "I am the HOA president. You can't threaten me with legal action." I remained calm, standing by my car door. "It's not a threat, Karen. It's notification that I have evidence of vandalism to my property and that I intend to pursue all available remedies. The repair quote from my window is $820 because the scratch is too deep to buff out." "I had nothing to do with your window," she declared, though her eyes darted away as she said it. "And sending a letter with 3 attorneys copied on it is clearly an attempt to intimidate me. They're my colleagues, and they're interested parties since they'll be representing me if necessary," I replied evenly. "Regarding the damage, I have video footage from yesterday morning and multiple photos showing that the damage corresponds exactly to where my sticker was placed. I also have testimonials from 2 neighbors who saw you approach my vehicle yesterday when I wasn't home." This last part was a bluff. I had no such testimonials. But Karen's reaction told me everything I needed to know. Her face went pale, then mottled with anger. "This is absurd. I was enforcing the rules. That sticker was unauthorized, and you were given notice to remove it," she sputtered. "Doesn't extend to property damage. Karen, that's vandalism, plain and simple. As my letter outlined, the selective enforcement of the sticker policy is problematic at best, discriminatory at worst. By now, a few neighbors had come out to their porches or paused their evening walks to observe our confrontation." Karen noticed the audience and attempted to regain her composure. "We'll see what the board has to say about this," she said, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. "I've been president for 6 years. Do you really think they'll side with a newcomer over me?" I shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not, but I'm not addressing this with the board just yet. My next step is filing a police report for the vandalism, followed by a small claims court filing for the damages if necessary. After that, my colleagues and I will examine the HOA's compliance with state regulations regarding open meetings, financial transparency, and election procedures." Karen's mouth opened and closed wordlessly for a moment. "You wouldn't dare," she finally managed. "I'm not looking for trouble, Karen. I just want to be left alone to enjoy my home and have my property respected. But if you're asking whether I'll follow through with legal action, yes, I absolutely will." She took a step back, recalculating her position. "Look, perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I'm sure we can resolve this amicably without involving courts or police." "I'm open to amicable resolution," I agreed. "That would start with an acknowledgement of the damage, payment for repairs, and assurance that neither my property nor I will be targeted for selective enforcement in the future." Karen's jaw clenched. "I did not damage your property, but in the interest of community harmony, I could see if the HOA might cover the repair as a goodwill gesture. However, That would require you to acknowledge that you violated Section 8.3 and to agree to follow all guidelines moving forward. That's not an amicable resolution, Karen. That's you trying to leverage the situation to force compliance while avoiding responsibility. I pulled out my phone. I'll go ahead and file that police report now. I've already documented everything. As I dialed, Karen snatched a piece of paper from her pocket and thrust it at me. Fine, look at this. It's the form you were supposed to fill out. All you had to do was follow the rules like everyone else. I glanced at the form, then back at her. This doesn't excuse vandalism. And if you're so concerned about everyone else following the rules, perhaps you can explain why you have 2 unauthorized stickers on your own vehicle. Her eyes widened. Those are official HOA educational merit displays, which are exempt under what section? I interrupted, because I've read the entire guideline, and there is no exemption clause for board members or educational merit stickers. If you're going to enforce rules, at least be consistent. One of the watching neighbors, an elderly gentleman with a walking cane, approached slowly. She's right. You know, he said to Karen, you cited me last year for my grandson's honor roll sticker. Said the exact same thing, Section 8.3. Karen shot him a venomous look. That's completely different, Harold. Your grandson's school isn't even in this district, so the rule depends on which school the sticker represents. I asked innocently. I must have missed that detail in the 97 pages of guidelines. Another neighbor had joined us by now, a woman in scrubs who looked like she'd just returned from a hospital shift. Karen, just last month, you made the Johnsons remove their son's military service sticker. You said no exceptions. Karen was beginning to look cornered. Those were different circumstances entirely. No, they weren't. The woman in scrubs cut in. You've been selectively enforcing rules for years. We're all just too afraid of becoming your next target to say anything. I could see more neighbors gathering, sensing a shift in the power dynamic. Karen noticed too and began backing toward her house. This discussion is over, she announced, attempting to regain her authoritative tone. I'll have the board review all of this at our next meeting. Until then, I suggest everyone remember that Oakwood Estates has standards for a reason. As she retreated, I called after her. I'll expect a response to my cease and desist letter by tomorrow, Karen. After that, I moved forward with legal action. She slammed her front door without responding. The next morning, I filed a police report as promised. The officer who took my statement seemed unsurprised when I mentioned the HOA dispute. We get calls from your neighborhood all the time, he sighed, typing in my information. Usually, it's your HOA president reporting violations. This is the first time someone's reported her. I provided all my documentation, including the photos of the damage, the timeline of events, and a copy of the cease and desist letter. The officer assured me they would follow up and contact Karen for a statement. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA board. Mine is Karen's signature, acknowledging the incident, apologizing for the damage, and offering to pay for the repair. They also included notice of an emergency board meeting scheduled for the following week to address recent concerns regarding rule enforcement procedures. I attended that meeting, as did nearly every homeowner in Oakwood Estates. The community center meeting room was packed with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. Karen sat stiffly at the board table, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. She wore a blazer with the Oakwood Estates logo, as if the extra display of officialdom might shield her from what was coming. The meeting began with the vice president announcing that the board had conducted an internal investigation after receiving serious allegations of misconduct. Based on our findings, including security camera footage from a neighbor's doorbell, camera that clearly shows the incident in question, we had determined that there was indeed an authorized act of property damage perpetrated by a board member. The vice president stated, his voice grave. Karen's head snapped up. What? Footage? There was no camera. This is a setup, she exclaimed, her voice shrill with panic. The vice president looked at her with obvious disappointment. Karen, we've all seen the video. You were recorded approaching the vehicle with a metal scraper, deliberately damaging the window, and then walking away. The footage has been shared with the police department. There actually had been a doorbell camera just not one I knew about initially. One of the neighbors had come forward after seeing our confrontation, offering footage that clearly showed Karen in the act. Apparently, she'd been so focused on my alleged violation that she hadn't noticed the camera peering down from the neighbor's porch. Furthermore, the vice president continued, "Our review of HOA records indicate a pattern of selective enforcement and procedural irregularities that are deeply concerning." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Many residents nodded in agreement. Some even applauded. The police have indicated that they will not be pressing criminal charges at this time, provided that full restitution is made and that certain organizational changes are implemented, he said, glancing uncomfortably at Karen. Karen clutched her designer handbag with white-knuckled hands. "I've given 6 years of my life to this community. I've maintained our property values. I've kept the riffraff out. And this is how you repay me? Over one little incident." "This isn't about one incident," said a board member to her right, a retired teacher I met briefly at the mailboxes. "This is about a pattern of behavior that has created a hostile living environment for many residents. We've received over 40 complaints in just the past year alone." "Complaints?" Karen sputtered. "From who? I want names." "That's exactly the problem," the vice president interjected firmly. "People are afraid to speak up because of potential retaliation. That's not how a community should function." He cleared his throat and continued with the official business. Because of these findings, the board has unanimously voted, with Karen abstaining, to remove Karen Wilkinson from her position as HOA president effective immediately. The room erupted in murmurs and a few scattered claps. Karen's face had gone completely white. Additionally, the vice president continued over her protest. "The board will be covering the cost of repairs to the damaged vehicle, but we want to be clear that Karen will be personally responsible for reimbursing the HOA for this expense, as this was an individual action and not one authorized by the board." In the end, Karen's 6-year reign of terror came to an embarrassing halt. The very HOA she once controlled turned against her, and her power crumbled in front of the entire neighborhood. The best part? She had no one to blame but herself. I got my car repaired, fully covered by the HOA, with Karen footing the bill. More importantly, the HOA underwent major changes to prevent future abuses of power. But the biggest victory? Watching Karen's shocked expression as she was removed from her position, her reputation destroyed by her own actions. Moral of the story? Never mess with a lawyer, especially over something as petty as a parking sticker. So, what do you guys think? Have you ever dealt with a power-tripping HOA president like Karen? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more wild HOA dramas.